There's a quiet conversation happening across the United Kingdom, in kitchen corners, on buses, and office tea breaks. Why does it feel like we're working harder but getting less? For decades, there was a sense, spoken or unspoken, that life here, while never perfect, offered a certain stability. A steady job could buy a home. Public services, though not lavish, worked. The NHS was there when you needed it. Your pension would see you through retirement. But somewhere along the way, the ground began to shift. House prices shot up, far outpacing wages. Energy bills climbed. Trains cost more but ran late. Public services stretched thinner. Secure jobs were replaced with short-term contracts. And for the first time in a long while, many families began to wonder if their children might face a harder life than they did. It hasn't been one dramatic collapse, it's been a slow drip. A chipping away of security, opportunity, and trust. And now the UK economy, once a model of stability, is wrestling with deep and complex challenges. The cost of living crisis, regional inequality, strain on the NHS, the aftershocks of Brexit, a housing shortage, stagnant wages, and the quiet, growing feeling that the rules of the game have changed, but no one's been given a new playbook. But here's the thing. Economies aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're living systems, shaped by values, choices, and the stories we tell ourselves about what's possible. And that means they can be rewritten. This isn't about nostalgia for a better past. It's about facing the present with clear eyes and the future with imagination. Because these challenges, as heavy as they feel, are not immovable. They're signals. They're questions. They're invitations to think differently about what kind of country we want to be. In this video, we'll explore 10 of the biggest problems facing the UK economy today, not just the headlines, but the human impact. And more importantly, we'll look at how to fix them. Not only through policy and politics, but through culture, community, and personal choice. Because you don't need an economics degree to know something's off. You feel it in your weekly shop, in your rent or mortgage payment, in the hours you work versus the time you have for yourself. And maybe that discomfort isn't something to ignore, it's something to listen to. Because what's at stake here isn't just GDP or inflation rates. It's the everyday dignity of millions of people. The ability to not just get by, but to live well. The sense that if you work hard, you should have enough not in luxury, but in security. The good news? Change is possible, and it starts with understanding the problems clearly enough to imagine solutions. So let's take a closer look, not just at what's broken, but at what's worth building. 1. The vanishing promise of social mobility. For much of the 20th century, the UK carried a quiet pride in the idea that where you started in life didn't have to determine where you ended up. Education, hard work, and determination could lift you from modest beginnings to comfortable stability. But in recent years, that promise has been fading. Today, the data tells a sobering story. Social mobility in the UK has stalled. For many, your postcode at birth still plays a bigger role in your life chances than your talents or effort. Children born into wealth are far more likely to stay there. Children born into poverty face steeper climbs than ever before. And it's not just statistics, it's lived reality. If you grow up in a struggling town in the north or a coastal community that's seen industries decline, opportunities are harder to find. Job prospects may be limited to low-paid, insecure work. Public transport might be unreliable or expensive, cutting off access to wider job markets. Education resources vary drastically between areas, with schools in affluent boroughs often better funded and staffed than those in poorer regions. Meanwhile, the cost of further education has risen. University graduates leave with heavy debt. Apprenticeships and vocational pathways, while improving, still carry less social prestige. And professional networks, the kind that open doors, are too often inherited rather than earned. It all adds up to a quiet truth. The ladder of opportunity still exists, but the rungs are uneven and for some missing altogether. So how do we fix it? First, by investing where it matters most: early childhood. Research shows that the gap in opportunity begins before a child even starts school. Quality childcare, accessible to all, is a long-term investment in social mobility. Second, by ensuring that education funding is not determined by postcode wealth. Schools in struggling areas need targeted support, better facilities, smaller class sizes, well-paid teachers, and robust career guidance. Third, by valuing diverse career paths. The UK's economy depends not only on university graduates, but also on skilled trades, creative industries, and emerging green jobs. Respecting and promoting these routes gives young people more than one definition of success. And finally, by bridging regional divides, improving transport links, broadband access, and local investment so that geography doesn't dictate destiny. Because social mobility isn't just about individual ambition, it's about a society that clears the path for all, not just the privileged few. If the UK can revive this promise, it's not only good for fairness, it's good for the economy. Talent wasted is potential lost. And right now, we can't afford to waste either. 2. The cost of living squeeze. Walk into a supermarket today and you can feel it before you even reach the checkout. The numbers on the till climb faster than they used to. Essentials bread, milk, fruit, vegetables now cost noticeably more than they did just a year or two ago. Energy bills have spiked. Rents are climbing, mortgages are higher as interest rates rise. Train fares go up each year even when services feel unreliable. Wages, meanwhile, haven't kept pace. This is the cost of living crisis, something that isn't just about numbers on a chart, but about the emotional and practical pressure it puts on millions of households across the UK. For many, it means hard choices, heating or eating, cutting back on fresh food for cheaper, less healthy options, delaying home repairs, working extra shifts or side jobs just to keep the bills paid. Parents skip meals so their children can eat first. The squeeze is especially harsh on those who were already just getting by. Benefits have not risen in line with inflation, and support schemes often feel like sticking plasters on a much deeper wound. In rural areas where public transport is scarce, car fuel costs add another layer of strain. In cities, rising rents consume bigger chunks of income, leaving little left over for savings. And here's the deeper issue: when so much of your income goes on simply surviving, there's nothing left to invest in your future. No savings, no home deposit, no training for a better job. Over time, the squeeze becomes a trap. So what's the way forward? On a national scale, tackling the cost of living crisis means targeted intervention, supporting households with energy costs in the short term, while addressing the root causes in the long term. That means investment in renewable energy to reduce dependency on volatile global fuel markets. It means regulating rental markets to prevent excessive hikes. And it means making public transport affordable and reliable so people have real alternatives to expensive commutes. We also need to address wages. Fair pay isn't just about keeping up with inflation, it's about recognizing the value of work that keeps the country running. From carers to delivery drivers, teachers to shop staff, many essential workers are still paid far less than the cost of living demands. On a personal level, it's about finding community-based resilience. Food co-ops, skill-sharing groups, local repair cafes, these small local networks can make a real difference in easing the squeeze. And they remind us that in times of economic strain, connection matters as much as cash. Because while the cost of living crisis is often spoken about in terms of numbers, at its heart, it's about dignity. The dignity of being able to live a life where every decision isn't weighed against whether you can afford it. 3. The housing struggle. For generations in the UK, owning a home wasn't just a dream, it was an expectation. A rite of passage that marked adulthood and stability. Even renting offered a sense of security, with long-term tenancies and affordable rates. But today, that picture has changed dramatically. House prices have soared far beyond the reach of the average salary. In many parts of the country, especially London and the Southeast, even a modest home can cost more than 10 times the average annual income. Saving for a deposit can take years, even decades, while wages fail to keep pace. Renting, once a reasonable alternative, has also become increasingly unaffordable. Tenants face steep yearly increases, bidding wars, and short contracts that offer little stability. Many live in cramped conditions or poorly maintained properties because moving is too expensive or too uncertain. And while the housing crisis hits hardest in big cities, it's spreading everywhere. In rural areas, rising demand from second home buyers and holiday lets has pushed locals out of their own communities. Young people are often forced to move far from family just to find somewhere they can afford. The problem runs deeper than supply and demand. For decades, housing policy has treated homes as investment assets rather than as a human need. Large-scale developers build luxury flats that often sit empty while affordable housing targets go unmet. Investors and landlords hold multiple properties while first-time buyers compete over what's left. The result? A generation locked out. Not because they're lazy or unwilling to work hard, but because the maths simply doesn't add up. So what's the solution? On a policy level, the UK needs a serious commitment to building more affordable and social housing, not just on paper, but in bricks and mortar. This means reforming planning laws to prioritize community needs over developer profits, taxing empty properties, and reining in speculative buying that inflates prices. Renters need stronger protections, caps on annual rent increases, longer tenancy agreements, and guaranteed standards for living conditions. Housing shouldn't be a gamble, it should be a guarantee. And culturally, we need to challenge the idea that renting is failure or that housing is a get-rich-quick scheme. A home should be a place to live first, an investment second. Because without affordable, stable housing, everything else becomes harder: finding work, starting a family, saving for the future. Housing isn't just a market issue, it's the foundation on which lives are built. And right now, too many foundations are crumbling. 4. The North-South Divide. Travel from London to Leeds or from Manchester to Cornwall, and you can feel it not just in accents or scenery, but in opportunity. For decades, the UK has struggled with a deep and persistent regional inequality, often summed up in one phrase: the North-South Divide. But it's not just about North and South, it's about London and the Southeast pulling ahead, while many other parts of the country lag behind. The capital is home to a concentration of wealth, investment, infrastructure, and high-paying jobs. It attracts global business, top graduates, and cultural institutions. Meanwhile, large parts of the North, Midlands, Wales, and coastal communities face weaker economies, fewer opportunities, and slower growth. It's not that talent is missing outside London, it's that investment is. In many towns, industries that once supported entire communities, mining, shipbuilding, manufacturing, have vanished, leaving gaps that were never properly filled. Public transport between regional towns is patchy and expensive. Broadband speeds are slower in rural and post-industrial areas, making it harder for businesses to compete in a digital economy. And the gap shows up in everyday life. Life expectancy is lower in poorer regions. Access to quality healthcare and education varies widely. Even the chances of finding a secure, well-paying job are shaped by your postcode. For years, politicians have promised to level up Britain, but real progress has been slow. Funding for regional development often comes in short bursts, tied to election cycles, rather than as part of a long-term, consistent strategy. Closing this divide will take more than slogans. It means investing heavily in transport links that connect towns to each other, not just to London. It means bringing affordable, high-speed broadband to every community, so remote work and digital businesses can flourish. It means creating incentives for companies to set up outside the capital and supporting local entrepreneurship that keeps profits in the region. It also means listening to the people who live there. Too often, decisions for struggling towns are made in Westminster boardrooms without input from those directly affected. Bridging the divide isn't just about fairness, it's about resilience. A country that depends too heavily on one region for economic growth is vulnerable. A country where every region thrives is stronger, more stable, and better prepared for the future. Because talent, ambition, and creativity are everywhere in the UK. Opportunity should be too. 5. The NHS under strain. For generations, the National Health Service has been one of the UK's proudest achievements. A promise that no matter your income, background, or postcode, you could get care when you needed it, free at the point of use. It's more than a public service, it's part of the national identity. But today, the NHS is under pressure like never before. Waiting lists are at record highs. People are waiting months, sometimes years, for routine procedures. GP appointments can be hard to get. A&E departments are overcrowded, with patients waiting on trolleys for hours. Ambulance response times have stretched dangerously long in some areas. The causes are complex: years of underfunding, an aging population, rising demand, staff shortages, and the lingering effects of the pandemic. Many NHS workers are leaving due to burnout, low pay, and impossible workloads. Those who stay often feel they're firefighting instead of delivering the level of care they trained for. And for patients, the experience can feel like a lottery. If you live in a well-funded area, you may still get timely care. In under-resourced regions, delays and shortages can turn treatable conditions into long-term struggles. The crisis is about more than healthcare, it's about trust. The NHS was built on the principle that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. When that promise feels broken, the impact ripples through society. People begin to lose faith not just in the system, but in the idea that we can depend on one another. So how do we protect the NHS for future generations? Funding is part of the answer, but money alone won't solve the problem. The system needs reform that focuses on prevention as much as treatment, investing in public health, mental health services, nutrition, and community care to reduce pressure on hospitals. It means valuing NHS staff not just with applause, but with fair pay, safe working conditions, and proper staffing levels. It means using technology wisely to cut paperwork, streamline processes, and free up more time for patient care without replacing the human connection that makes the NHS unique. And it means honesty. We need a national conversation about what the NHS can realistically deliver and the political will to ensure it can meet that promise. Because losing the NHS wouldn't just be losing a healthcare system, it would be losing part of what it means to be British. 6. The rise of insecure work. There's a phrase you hear a lot these days in Britain. It's flexible. It's the selling point for the gig economy, short-term contracts, zero-hours jobs, and freelance platforms. Work when you want. Be your own boss. Fit your job around your life. And for some, that's genuinely true. A bit of extra income, a side hustle, a way to fill the gaps. But for millions of others, flexibility is just another word for insecurity. Zero-hours contracts mean you might not know how much you'll earn from one week to the next. You could be called in at the last minute or sent home without pay. Gig work can mean long hours for low returns with no sick pay, no holiday pay, and no pension contributions. Even skilled professionals in sectors like education, healthcare, and the arts are finding themselves hopping from short-term contract to short-term contract, never able to plan too far ahead. This instability doesn't just affect bank balances, it affects lives. It makes it harder to rent or buy a home when you can't show steady income. It makes saving for the future almost impossible. It adds a constant background hum of stress. Will I have enough hours next month? Will this contract be renewed? And here's the hidden cost. Insecure work shifts power. When your livelihood can disappear overnight, it's harder to speak up about unfair treatment, unsafe conditions, or low pay. So how do we fix this? We need to modernize workers' rights for the realities of today's job market. That means guaranteeing basic protections like sick pay, holiday pay, and pension contributions to all workers, regardless of contract type. It means clearer rules on minimum hours and notice periods for shifts. Platforms and employers who rely on flexible labor should share the responsibility of stability. If a business depends on you to deliver its service, you should be able to depend on it for fair treatment. And on a cultural level, we need to stop romanticizing hustle culture. The idea that you should always have 2 or 3 jobs just to get by isn't a mark of ambition, it's a sign that something is broken. Work should give people a foundation, not keep them balancing on a tightrope. Because when workers are secure, the economy is stronger. People spend more, plan more, and build more when they can trust their income. And that trust is worth protecting. 7. The education gap. For generations, education in the UK has been seen as the great equalizer, a pathway to opportunity no matter where you start. The idea was simple. Work hard at school, get good qualifications, and doors will open. But in reality, that pathway is becoming less even, and for some, it's narrowing entirely. The first challenge is access and quality. Schools in wealthier areas often benefit from better funding, facilities, and teacher retention, while those in deprived areas can struggle with larger class sizes, fewer resources, and higher staff turnover. This postcode lottery means that 2 children of the same age living just a few miles apart can have vastly different educational experiences. Then there's the cost of higher education. Since tuition fees were introduced and later tripled, students are graduating with tens of thousands of pounds in debt. For some, this debt is a manageable trade-off for a well-paying career. For others, it's a heavy financial shadow that lingers for decades, especially if they don't enter high-income fields. Vocational and technical training, which could provide stable, skilled careers without the university price tag, has often been undervalued. While progress is being made, there's still a perception that apprenticeships are a lesser option, which stops many young people from exploring them fully. And beyond formal education, the UK still hasn't fully embraced lifelong learning. In a fast-changing economy where industries rise and fall quickly, the ability to retrain and upskill is essential. But adult education budgets have been cut, and many working adults can't afford the time or cost of returning to study. So what needs to change? First, equalizing funding and resources so that a child's educational opportunities aren't dictated by their postcode. Quality education must be a right, not a privilege. Second, diversifying pathways to success, valuing apprenticeships, vocational qualifications, and non-traditional careers just as much as university degrees. Third, investing in lifelong learning. Subsidized courses, employer-led training, and accessible online learning platforms can keep skills fresh and workers adaptable. And finally, teaching beyond exams. Schools should prepare students not just for the workplace, but for life, with skills in financial literacy, digital awareness, problem-solving, and mental well-being. Because education should be a launchpad, not a filter. A society that wastes talent by making education inaccessible, narrow, or unequal wastes its future. 8. Crumbling infrastructure. The UK is a country with deep history, and unfortunately, that history is written into much of its infrastructure. Roads, railways, bridges, water systems, and public buildings that were built for another era are now under growing strain. You can see it in the daily commute. Delayed trains, overcrowded carriages, canceled services. You can see it in the roads riddled with potholes, in the Victorian-era water pipes that burst and flood streets, in the outdated school buildings needing urgent repairs. In some ways, this is the legacy of underinvestment. Maintenance budgets have been cut or delayed for years, with fixes only coming after something fails. Political cycles favor short-term wins over the long, slow work of keeping the foundation strong. And the cost of neglect is rising. The longer repairs are postponed, the more expensive they become. Leaks and breakdowns disrupt businesses. Transport failures make it harder for people to work, study, or attend appointments. Entire communities can be isolated when rail lines close or bus routes are cut. It's not just inconvenient, it's a drag on the economy. Poor infrastructure makes it harder to attract investment, slows productivity, and widens regional inequality. The environmental toll is also high. Old systems are often inefficient and wasteful. Aging buildings leak heat. Outdated public transport pushes more people into cars, increasing emissions. So what's the way forward? First, a commitment to long-term planning. Infrastructure renewal can't be left to emergency patch-ups. It needs multi-decade strategies that survive changes in government. Second, investment in sustainable upgrades. This means electrifying rail lines, expanding renewable energy grids, upgrading housing for energy efficiency, and modernizing water and waste systems. Third, thinking regionally, not just pouring money into London-centric projects, but ensuring every part of the UK gets the transport, connectivity, and public services it needs to thrive. And finally, seeing infrastructure not as a sunk cost, but as an investment in resilience. Every pound spent on keeping the basics strong is a pound that supports economic growth, public safety, and community well-being. Because without strong foundations, even the most ambitious plans will collapse. 9. The digital divide. On paper, the UK is one of the most connected nations in the world. Nearly everyone owns a smartphone. Most households have internet access. Businesses run online, government services have moved digital, and social life often plays out on screens. But beneath the surface, there's a growing gap between those who can fully participate in the digital economy and those who can't. In rural areas, broadband speeds can still be painfully slow, and in some communities, reliable coverage is non-existent. For people in these areas, remote work, online learning, or even accessing essential services can be a constant struggle. In low-income households, the barrier isn't just access, it's affordability. Reliable internet and modern devices cost money. And for families already squeezed by rising living costs, it can be a luxury they can't consistently maintain. Children may have to share one outdated device for schoolwork, or adults may have to choose between paying for data and paying for food. Then there's the issue of digital skills. As more services move online, those without the skills to navigate them risk being excluded, particularly older people, or those who've never had the chance to build confidence with technology. And even for those fully connected, there's another challenge: the hidden costs of life lived online. The gig economy's instability, the erosion of work-life boundaries, social media's impact on mental health, the way personal data is collected, sold, and used to shape choices without our knowledge. Bridging this divide isn't just about installing faster broadband. It's about making the digital economy fair, inclusive, and humane. That means universal, affordable internet access, treating it as a basic utility, not a luxury. It means investing in community training programs to boost digital literacy at every age. It means regulating tech companies so they can't exploit users' attention and personal data without transparency or accountability. It also means remembering that online should be a tool for life, not a replacement for it. Technology can connect us, but it can also distract us from the relationships, environments, and offline experiences that give life its depth. The digital future will shape the UK economy in ways we can't yet fully predict. But if we want that future to be fair, we need to make sure no one is left standing on the wrong side of the divide. 10. The emotional toll of economic uncertainty. Not every problem in the UK economy can be measured in pounds and pence. Some of the most damaging effects are harder to see felt in the mind, in relationships, in the quiet moments when people lie awake wondering how they'll manage. Economic uncertainty has a way of getting under the skin. When your job feels insecure, when bills keep climbing, when housing seems out of reach, the stress isn't just practical, it's personal. It can affect your sleep, your health, your patience, even your sense of identity. In the UK, where cultural pride often comes from being resilient and getting on with it, Many people bottle up this stress. They carry it silently, worried that speaking about financial struggles might be seen as complaining or weakness. But the emotional cost is real. Anxiety, burnout, depression. These are all rising in a climate where people feel they have to constantly push harder just to stay still. Communities can become more fragmented when people are focused on survival rather than connection. Trust in institutions erodes when promises of opportunity and fairness feel hollow. And here's the hardest part. This emotional toll doesn't just affect individuals, it affects the whole economy. Stressed, overworked people are less productive, less creative, and less likely to take the kinds of risks that drive growth. So what can be done? Part of the answer lies in policies that restore stability. Affordable housing, secure work, reliable public services, fair wages. These create the conditions where people can stop living in constant fight or flight mode. But part of it is cultural. We need to normalize honest conversations about money, mental health, and uncertainty. We need to strengthen community networks, places where people can turn for support, advice, or even just a listening ear. And on an individual level, it's about reclaiming moments of rest and perspective. Finding small pockets of life that aren't measured by productivity or profit. Remembering that your worth isn't tied to your wage slip, your job title, or your ability to keep up. Because an economy isn't just about how much a country produces, it's about how its people feel living within it. If those people are anxious, disconnected, and exhausted, then no amount of GDP growth can truly be called success. Which brings us to the most important part, how we take all of these challenges and turn them into something better. If you've stayed with me through all of this, you've probably felt it, the thread running through every challenge we've talked about. It's not just about money, housing, wages, or public services. It's about something deeper. The feeling that the balance has tipped. That for too many people in the UK, life has become less about building a future and more about holding on to the present. We've looked at the vanishing promise of social mobility, the cost of living squeeze, the housing struggle, the North-South divide, the NHS under strain, insecure work, the education gap, crumbling infrastructure, the digital divide, and the emotional toll of economic uncertainty. These aren't isolated problems, they're connected. One reinforces another. Housing affects mental health. Wages affect education. Infrastructure affects opportunity. And at the heart of it all is a question: what kind of country do we want to be? Because the UK economy is not just numbers on a treasury spreadsheet, it's a living system made of people. And people can change it. Change won't come from one policy or one election. It will take long-term vision, investment, and the courage to look beyond the next headline. It will mean funding public services because they are the foundation of a fair society. It will mean valuing all types of work, not just the jobs that make the biggest profits. It will mean making housing a right, not a privilege. But it will also mean something less tangible and just as important: choosing the kind of values we build the economy on. Do we reward extraction or contribution? Do we measure success only in growth or also in well-being? Do we accept a country where opportunity is uneven, or do we insist on one where every region, every community can thrive? On a personal level, change begins with small acts. Supporting local businesses, volunteering time or skills, speaking up about unfairness, being honest about struggles, because when we tell the truth about how the system feels, we make it harder for those struggles to be ignored. We can't fix everything at once, but we can start. And each choice we make to value people over profit, to protect the vulnerable, to invest in the future, becomes part of a new story. The UK's economic challenges are real and they're urgent, but so is our capacity to meet them. Because economies are not carved in stone. They're built piece by the decisions we make together. And that means we're not just passengers on this journey, we're the ones holding the map. The question is, where do we want to go from here?